Grace and peace to you in the name of God, the one who created us all with love. In the name of Jesus, the one who came down to earth to teach us all how to love. And in the name of the Holy Spirit, the one whose presence inspires the very love we celebrate and remember today. The love that Judy shared in her life and that now lives on through her legacy. I'm standing here in Calvary's Foot of the Cross courtyard, which is where I stood with Judy's family earlier this morning as we interred her cremains. It's a beautiful space, a sacred space, made holy by the presence of God and by the presence of saints who have gone on before us. As we tune in to this hour through the modern miracle of technology, I invite you to hear these assuring and hope-filled words of Jesus from John's Gospel. I am the resurrection and I am life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. We are indeed grateful for the life eternal we have with God. And yet, it is also a life well lived here on earth that we celebrate today, the life of Judith Ann Drury. Judy was born into this world on June 16, 1930 in Chicago, Illinois, and she went to forever be with God on January 27th of this year. In her 89 and a half years, Judy was full of life, and she lived a joy-filled life. She was a daughter and a sister, a mother and grandmother, a college graduate, and a lifelong learner in every sense of the word. She was a teacher and a world traveler, a friend and a faithful churchgoer. Judy loved poetry and puzzles, musicals, museums, and movies. She loved to send cards and keep in touch. In fact, she went to every high school and college reunion up until about the last decade. She liked tradition, Stouffer's stuffing at Thanksgiving, and pencils, notepads, walnuts, and oranges in the stockings at Christmas. She loved pecan pie and baking cookies. She loved Carol Burnett and Miss Piggy, and all the Muppets for that matter. She loved to read, the newspaper, and mysteries. She delighted in the Mrs. Polifax stories, the Just So stories by Rudyard Kipling, Old Possum's Book of Cats by T.S. Eliot, and When We Were Young by A.A. Milne. She loved family history and passing along stories and information to the generations below, and she loved her church family here at Calvary. Judy was a woman of deep and consistent faith, enduring many trials, sufferings, and losses with resilience and hope. She was soft-spoken but strong, tough and yet tender and thoughtful. She was independent but loved to connect with others, shy yet social. She was brave, curious, and resourceful. From weekly water aerobics to once-in-a-lifetime around-the-world adventures, she was active in body, mind, and spirit. She was gutsy and giving. She was present for her family, and she participated in just about anything and everything. She was particular about some things, open-minded about many things, and had a sense of awe and wonder about most things, especially wildlife and the beauty of God's creation. Judy was a student of the world, a woman of faith, a good friend, and she was full of love. And she fully loved the ones she spent her life with, especially her family. Her daughter Marilyn and her husband Dan, and their children, Talitha and Daniel, Tiara, Kirsha, and Camilla. Her daughter Donna and her children, Kayla, Angel, Michael, Josh, and Chris. And her son Ken and his children, Shannon and Kira. We do take a moment to think of those family members who have preceded Judy in death, especially her mother, Bernice, her father, Donald, her stepmother, Christine, and her older brother, Donald Jr. We give thanks for each of their lives, and we trust that they are now joined in life eternal with God. Judy gave of herself with love and service to God, to her family, her friends, her community, and her church. And so today we give what we can of ourselves in thanksgiving and gratitude to God for gifting us with the privilege of knowing Judy and of having her in our lives. Thanks be to God for Judith Ann Drury, who is and was and will forever be a beloved child of God. Judy is with the Lord, and the Lord is with us. Throughout the service, I'll be sharing scriptures with you that speak of Judy's life, spirit, and faith. Judy was a very involved and active person. She was always coming and going, whether through her activities at home or her travels abroad. But wherever she was grounded in God and in the awe and beauty of creation. No matter where she went or where she was, she knew God was with her in all of her comings and goings. Psalm 121 is a beautiful prayer that draws our eyes toward nature, the strength of the mountains, and God's presence in our lives, while reminding us that God journeys with us wherever we go. We are never alone. Join me in reading Psalm 121 aloud as an opening prayer. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on and forevermore. Judy indeed loved nature, the beauty of her father's world. Scripture also tells us that present from the beginning, as God created the world and the natural beauty around us, was a wisdom. The book of Proverbs refers to this source as Lady Wisdom. Judy knew there was an innate wisdom and beauty in the created world, and she knew that you also needed to seek out wisdom and keep your brain and body active your whole life long. And she herself was a fount of wisdom as she taught others, whether students in the classroom, her own kids at home, or her friends and peers through discussions on books and movies, politics and faith. Hear these words from the Old Testament. First, from the wisdom writer about Lady Wisdom, from Proverbs chapter 8. Does not wisdom call, and does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights, beside the way, at the crossroads, she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrances of the portals, she cries out, "To you, O people, I call, and my cry is to all who live. O simple ones, learn prudence, acquire intelligence, you who lack it. Hear, for I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. And when he had not yet made earth and fields, or the world's first bits of soil. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. When he established the fountains of the deep. When he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him, like a master worker, and I was his daily delight. Rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the human race. Happy is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. Wisdom is indeed in the created world, and it's also found in our faith. Part of the wisdom of our faith is that we don't always have the answers, but we step into the unknown and take risks. We take risks for the sake of justice and equality and peace and liberation in our world, as we hear from the prophet Micah. He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. And we take risks as we adventure to wherever God calls us, no matter how bumpy or uncertain or unknown the road ahead is. As Joshua 1:9 reminds us, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Wherever Judy went, and she went a lot of places, she went with faith, not fear. She let God lead her, and in turn, she led all of us.
He leadeth me, O blessed thought, O words with heavenly comfort wrought. Whate'er I do, where'er I be, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me, by his own hand he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. Lord, clasp thy hand in mine, nor ever murmur nor repine. Content whatever lot I see, since 'tis thy hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me by his own hand, he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me.
In my mom's house, upstairs on the wall in the hall, there hangs a large framed document. It is maybe 3 foot wide and by 5 foot high, give or take. It is the pedigree of the Angus family that our family links back to. While I'm not totally sure whether it's on her mom's side or her dad's side, I think it's pretty amazing that it exists. The copyright date on the document is 1878. In Roman numerals, MDCCCLXXVIII. There are references of notes made back to 1584 to 1752, taking it back at least 400 years or more. There are some lines that are heavier than others that I take to be our specific lineage from the land area that is now Great Britain. In her most recent years, Mom decided it was finally time to join the organization called Daughters of the American Revolution. Heritage was important to her. She said that the documentation trail through her mom, Bernice, was not strong enough for her to prove her ancestry, but the documentation for her mom's sister, Chalice, was very strong, so she was approved along that branch of the family. I suspect the reason she joined was to protect and enable an opportunity for an unbroken legacy to her heirs. One of the gifts my mom created for me was an album of the family history, going back at least 5 generations from me. The book starts with her mom's heritage, then her dad's heritage, and ends with her in her youngest years. There are branches to family members I remember visiting when we were young, 2 aunts and an uncle in Greeley, Colorado, and an aunt and a cousin in Boulder, Colorado. Great aunts, actually. We used to love to run around in their old, very interesting houses. The album begins with a photo of Anna Batesel Cochran, Mom's great-grandmother on her mom's side. There's also a later photo showing Anna's mom, yet another generation back. Aunt Nettie was Anna's sister and Mom's great-great-aunt. I remember seeing a maroon dress that had belonged to Aunt Nettie, who was a very small, petite woman, perhaps even the dress in this picture. Aunt Nettie wrote out the family history that starts with her father, their father actually, John Batesel, who was born April 4th, 1809, 211 years ago. This family history was written 80 years ago in 1940 when Aunt Nettie was 87 years old. Both the handwritten version on lined paper and Nettie's typed version are in the album. John Batesel originally came from New York, then moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, on to Indiana, and finally Iowa. Great-great-Aunt Nettie writes about his life as a pioneer in this frontier state of Iowa, starting in 1854, which would be about the time she was born or shortly thereafter. He was a city man who had never done farm work, so there were challenges. In New York, he was a cooper by trade, which I learned is a person trained to make wooden casks, barrels, vats, buckets, tubs, troughs, and other similar containers. The main part of their house was built of logs. I think I got to take a chink of wood from that log house to elementary school for show and tell. The chink was about the size of an adult's hand and shaped like a wedge, maybe a half-inch thick. It was used to fill the gap between the logs. It was a big deal to be allowed to share about it, and I had to be very careful with it. Nettie's sister, Anna Batesel, married G.W. Cochran in 1867 in St. Elmo, Colorado, which is about 50 miles south of Leadville. I do not know how she came to be in Colorado. She then lived in Greeley, Colorado, and died there February 25, 1929. Anna's daughter Blanche was Mom's grandmother. There is a picture taken of the 4 generations of Mom's mom, Bernice's side of the family. Bernice had not yet been born, but it shows Bernice's sister Chalice, their mom Blanche, their grandmother Anna Batesel Cochrane, and Anna's mom, Jane Watkins Batesel. Jane was born in Wales in May 23rd of 1812. She married John Batesel in 1839 and died January 6th of 1901. Anna Cochrane had 7 children, including Mom's grandmother, Blanche. We used to go visit 3 of Blanche's siblings in Greeley when we were growing up: Aunt Mabel, Aunt Grace, and Uncle Homer. One of the 7 children, Ethel, had died in the 1918 flu epidemic. Blanche, Mom's grandmother and one of the 7 children of Anna, married George Kelly September 15, 1892. They had 3 children. Chalice was the oldest, Howard, and Bernice, Mom's mom, the youngest. Bernice was born in Hotchkiss, Colorado, which is about an hour east of Grand Junction by today's travels. Mom's mom, Bernice, attended, and I assume graduated from, Colorado State Teachers College in Greeley, which is now known as the University of Northern Colorado. Bernice married Donald Elmer Richardson, Sr., perhaps in 1923, around the time of this picture. Mom's older brother, Donnie, Donald Elmer Richardson, Jr., was born September 12, 1925. By the time of his 3rd birthday, great-great-aunt Nettie was back in Indiana where these pictures were taken. Mom came along in 1930, 5 years after her only sibling, Donnie. Great-great-aunt Nettie had a relationship with Mom, as these pictures show, when she was about a year old. We see her sitting on the porch with the feet of her brother behind her. We also see Mom with her mom, Bernice. There are some pictures taken around 1933 when Mom was 3. The last one includes Mom's dad, our granddad, Donald E. Richardson, Sr. Mom's mom, Bernice, died when she was 4. 5 years later, her dad remarried. This time was to Margaret Christine Blair when Mom was 9. This was the grandmother Christine we knew growing up. As Granddad's first cousin as well as wife, their stories are entwined and told in the next segment. The history of my granddad in the album starts with a picture of Hugh Andrew Jones, born 1794 and died 1860. He lived in Maryland and bought a farm he called Paradise in 1830. It was near the old Conowingo Bridge near Castleton. It crossed about 2 miles upstream of the now Conowingo Dam, where Route 1 crosses the Susquehanna River that feeds the north end of the Chesapeake Bay. Hugh Jones was instrumental in funding and building that first bridge. He was a Quaker and a skillful millwright. Hugh's wife was Anne Kidd, whose grandmother had been born at sea to Madame Peacock, an English gentleman who came to this country because of religious troubles. Anne Kidd's grandmother married a man named Andrew Lyon and settled near Baltimore, Maryland. Hugh and Anne Jones had 10 children. They were 6 sons and 4 daughters. The youngest daughter was Margaret Cecilia, who was born in 1839 and died in 1924. She married James Anthony Richardson. They had 3 children: Elmer, my granddad's dad, James Edward, known as J. Ed in later life, and Hattie, my grandmother's mom. Elmer lived 80 years from 1862 to 1942. J. Ed was born a year later and was still alive at 90 in 1953, as shown in the picture on the right. Hattie Kidd Richardson Blair, pictured on the left, lived from 1866 to 1943. She was the mom of Christine, our grandmother, and Bessie Blair Armiger. Bessie was the mom of our Aunt Betty and Aunt Anne. Betty and her husband Lou would regularly host Thanksgiving with a couple dozen people at their home in the Baltimore area. Grandmother always went while she was alive. We went occasionally, especially for my grandmother's 90th birthday. Granddad's dad, Elmer, married Janie, also known as Jean Dixon, in 1883. They had 5 children. The oldest was Celia, named after Margaret Celia. The youngest was Mom's dad, Donald E. Richardson. We would visit Granddad's sister, Great Aunt Celia, and her daughter, Margaret, in Boulder, Colorado, while we were growing up. Like the Greeley relatives, they had a very interesting house for children to play in. Mom's dad, Donald, was an experimenter from his early days. I heard stories of things that he would investigate. The picture in the lower left shows him as a budding electrical engineer at 11 or 12 years old. He moved out to Montana at the age of 16 to make his way in the world. This was during the same time frame that his sister Celia was homesteading in Montana, although he did not live with her and her family. Instead, he was with his older brother Bob, who was homesteading near Fort Benton, where he clerked in a hardware store during the week. Celia's daughter, Mom's cousin Margaret, wrote a 32-page story called Montana Memories about that challenging time in Montana. Margaret's daughter, Sally Bircher, provided a copy of that story to our grandmother, Christine, in 1992. Don's sister, Celia, convinced him to continue his education while he was in Montana. He enrolled at Billings in a polytechnic school. When war was declared, World War I, he volunteered for submarine service. After the war, he went east to hold a full-time job while attending school. He got a PhD in physics and was a professor at the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago until he retired. I'm not sure where and how Don met and married Bernice. A couple of months before their son Donnie was born, in 1925, Don and Bernice visited his Aunt Hattie, who was the mom of our grandmother Christine. The lower picture shows both women who were mom to our mom, Christine on the far left and Bernice on the right. 5 years after Bernice had died, Donald married Christine in 1939. I like these last pictures in this set about my mom. She was an avid reader and quite fast. It looks like she got a great start at age 3. This last picture is my mom with her brother. I would guess that they're both still in elementary school.
Judy's brother, Donald, died on Good Friday, March 1945, shortly before the end of World War II. He was not far from the Battle of Bastogne, although that is not where he fought. He was buried in the Netherlands Cemetery. He received a Purple Heart Medal of Honor for his service. A friend of Judy's, Margot, was able to go a decade or so ago and bring back pictures and information. Judy's daughter, Marilyn, was privileged to go in May 2017 with her husband and daughter. They visited the various memorial cemeteries on Memorial Day weekend, and they heard precious stories of gratefulness for all that the Americans had done during World War II. The flags were set for every grave that weekend. The flowers were provided by local families who had adopted the graves of the fallen soldiers, knowing that their families were unlikely to be able to visit. Because Marilyn had let them know they were coming, they filled the etchings on Donald's tombstone with sand from Normandy to make it more visible for picture taking.
Mom was our Bluebird and Campfire Girl leader for 3 years, 1 year of Bluebirds and 2 years of Campfire Girls. We have pictures here of our group. This is Marilyn, and many of my classmates really appreciated what she did for us together. One of the fun things we did was an Argentina show where you learned to sing the songs in Spanish, something about a cat and something about a chicken, and we have the little costumes, and you'll see the pictures there. And we also had another project where we all learned to make jumpers or shifts and matching scarves for our heads, and there's a picture there of that. So it was a really precious thing that my mom gave to us and meant a lot to the people that I went to school with.
I'm Kirsha Van Horn, one of JJ's granddaughters, and one of my favorite and most recent memories of her is over the last couple of years we've been able to write letters back and forth, and I've gotten to learn so much about her growing up and career and how she decided that teaching was what she wanted to do. And it was amazing just to see her heart behind it all. And I still have all the letters that she sent to me.
Now hear these words from the New Testament. The Apostle Paul writes to communities of faith about the qualities of persistence, caring for one another, especially church family, rejoicing and giving thanks, voicing to God our celebrations and concerns, and holding fast to the things that we learn in life, so as to keep the faith and experience God's peaceful presence. Indeed, we are to root ourselves in our faith and continue to learn and grow, and then in turn we are to teach others. Sounds like Judy, doesn't it? Listen to Paul's words now from his letter to the Galatians. So let us not grow weary in doing what is right, for we will reap at harvest time if we do not give up. So then, whenever we have an opportunity, let us work for the good of all, and especially for those in the family of faith. From his letter to the Philippians. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say, rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. And from his letter to the Colossians. As you therefore have received Christ Jesus the Lord, continue to live your lives in him, rooted and built up in him and established in the faith, just as you were taught, abounding in thanksgiving. Indeed, when we live a life of faithfulness, we see the faithfulness of God in greater measure.
Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever wilt be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin, and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings are mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Judy would come into the office with a smile on her face and either a request or question. She was always pleased to find a dish of candy on the counter and helped herself to 1, 2, or more pieces. She enjoyed having someone with which to talk, and I was always happy to talk with her.
When Edith and I first came to Calvary in 1982, we quickly joined the Ambassador's Sunday School class, and Judy Drury was there. And she was a classmate of ours from 1982 all the way up until her last days. For many of those years, she was secretary of the class, keeping track of attendance and pointing out absentees who needed to be contacted. And she was, for many years, treasurer of the class, and for many years, both, secretary and treasurer. And in discussions, she always had something of value to add to the discussion. She had a varied background that was pertinent to most things we talked about. So she was a great classmate for many, many years. In her retirement, she was quite an adventurer. She traveled a lot. I don't remember the details, but she encountered some pretty strenuous hikes, and physical activity didn't faze her. And one memory I have is she told us that she had signed up for a parasailing lesson. And she went up there somewhere in the foothills and attended the class and all the orientation for a parasailing session. But when it came time to actually fly, they denied her. It involved running downhill to get started with this big sail strapped on your back, and they deemed her not physically able to do that. And she resented that. She said, I could have done that. So Judy was a great friend, a great adventurer, and we miss her and wish her family well.
I am Carmelita Hammond. When Ken and I first visited Calvary in about 1969, we were warmly welcomed into the ambassador class, which was then being taught by Eloise Lee. Judy was a part of that group. She may have been one of the founding members of the ambassador class back when we were all very young. Judy always had an interesting or provocative comment to add to class discussions. She has always been a good friend. These pictures were taken at class gatherings over the years. 1974, these ladies were guests at the ambassador mock wedding. Nancy Hoskins put the events together. A Southern tradition, she said. Ken was the bride. 1978, the tacky attire party. 1979, Christmas party with one of those white elephant gift exchanges. 1986, another Christmas party. 1986, the church farewell dinner for the Lees. Judy was collecting signatures for the Calvary memory quilt that would be given to the Lees. 1986, the ambassador class farewell party for the Lees. 1988, another class party of some sort. 2003, reunion party, ambassadors and the visiting Lees.
My name is Norma Wick, and I became acquainted with Judy when she was the treasurer of the ABWM Executive Board at Calvary, of which I was also a member. And I always admired her for her attention to detail, because if there was ever a question after she gave a treasurer's report about the treasury, she would research it until she found the right answer, and sometimes she had to take it with her and research later at the church office, but then she always emailed us all what the right answer was. When her circle disbanded because their missionaries retired, she became a member of Bethel Circle, and she was one of our most devoted and loyal members. We always enjoyed the month when she gave devotions, because she always had something original and interesting to say and thoughtful to share with us. And the rest of us, the month we gave devotions, we would just find a devotion in a devotion book and read it to the group, but not Judy. And she gave a Christmas devotion one year based on Galatians verse 23. And the members appreciated it so much that we asked her to read that devotion each December. The theme was a gift of love, and later she told me that she used it on her Christmas cards one year. Judy attended also the Creative Conversation GPS group, of which I was also a member. And the creative stories and pictures that she drew were a great contribution always, and we enjoyed having Judy in that group with us. She became a role model for many of us because of her courage to never give up, especially when it was physically difficult for her to attend church events. And I will miss her smile, and the many thoughtful conversations that she and I had together at church meetings. I will certainly miss Judy.
Hi, my name is Margie Jonell, and I have known Judy ever since 1977 when I first joined Calvary Baptist Church. Judy was always there. She was always at church whenever there was a service going on, or whenever there was a potluck or an ABW circle. When the doors were open at Calvary, Judy was there. She was truly the epitome of an active member. In the last few years, Judy and I belonged to the GPS group that was a movie group We would see movies and then get together and discuss what we saw. Again, Judy always had something to say, something to talk about her values, about the movie, about the people in it, and so forth. Judy was a very intellectual person, and I will miss her and her attitude so very much at our church. Rest in peace, Judy.
Hi, this is John Crone.
Hi, and I'm Kathy Crone.
And we were sponsors of the BFFs, the Baptist Film Fanatics group. About once a month or so, we'd get together and start out seeing a movie, and then later on we'd just pick a movie and people go see it on their own, and we'd get together at Perkins Restaurant and talk about the movie.
And Judy was part of the group from the beginning of when we did it. So
starting from when we did it, yeah. And she looked forward to the outing. She looked forward to seeing the movies. She looked forward to getting together with us, and I think she looked forward to the meals at Perkins.
I know, I remember she always liked to order baked potato soup. That was one of her favorites.
Yeah, another one was, I think at Perkins it was called Egg in the Hole. It was a variation of Toad in the Hole, an old English breakfast thing, egg and grilled bread. But we always looked forward to Judy's comments about the movies. She always had an opinion, and sometimes she'd have stories about her school days as a teacher, and we liked hearing those as well.
Yeah, we loved, she'd share about her family every once in a while. She was rather quiet most of the time, but not afraid to share in the discussions at all.
No, and we always looked forward to her, to seeing her, and we missed the movies, and we missed Judy as well. We wish her family well, and
in fact, we were actually waiting for Judy when she fell. The day she fell, we wondered where she was, and we were concerned, and then found out, some folks I think found out later that evening that she had fallen. So and her plan had been to come to the Perkins to meet with us for the discussion. So anyway,
yep, the world seems to be a smaller place with Judy not here with us anymore.
Definitely. So
this is Ann Scalfaro reading a memory from Linda Fisher. When my son Andrew Beard was in the youth group as a high school student, he began receiving cards in the mail occasionally, and they were always signed "From your SPP." For a couple of years, he received cards on many occasions: Halloween, Valentine's, Easter, always with that signature. The SPP was a mystery, and the sender was a mystery. In 2005, Andrew graduated from high school and left for college. Then one Sunday that fall, Judy asked about Andrew. Where is he attending college? How is he doing? Then she confessed that she was Andrew's mystery card sender. She had attended a luncheon at Calvary where the youth served the tables, and she said she took a notion to become Andrew's SPP, secret prayer partner. She enjoyed sending him cards, and I was grateful for Judy's dedication to letting him know someone was thinking of him and praying for him.
Judy Drury was gentle, quiet, caring, and kind, and oh so thoughtful. She was an amazingly well-read woman, so conversations were interesting and always in interesting directions. I have 4 visual images of Judy that I think of as I think of the relationship that we've had over the years. The first was the number of times she stopped me in the fellowship hall to ask about someone who was on the prayer list. She wanted to know how they were and what she could do. She genuinely cared for others. The second was the time that she called me for directions to get to my home. She was a part of a small group, and she needed to have the way to get here. I loved the fact that she always took a dry run before coming to a new destination. She had been here before, but needed to have it reviewed. That demonstrated her commitment to the community and to the small group. The third image I have is the day that she invited me to come to her house for tea. She served me a cup of tea and some cookies, and the conversation ranged everywhere from the families that we love to world politics and concerns over what's happening in our world. And then the fourth are the numerous visits that I made to Judy when she was in the hospital and in rehab centers. Those were difficult days for her, and yet there seemed almost always to be that sweet smile on her face. She was faithful to God. She was faithful to her family. She was faithful to her friends. I particularly remember the day that I read poetry to her because I knew that she loved poetry. I read Robert Frost's poem, The Road Less Traveled, and that produced a fascinating discussion about the roads that both of us have traveled. What an interesting, lively woman she was in such a quiet, gentle way. Her life was a gift, and I miss her.
And finally, our gospel reading, one of my favorite stories of Jesus when he was a boy. Listen to these words from the Gospel according to Luke. Now every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when Jesus was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went on for a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor. For the word of God in Scripture, for the word of God among us, for the word of God within us, thanks be to God. Doesn't this sound like Judy? I love it when Jesus says, "Why were you searching for me? Where else would I be," right? Here, I'm at the feet of the rabbis, at the feet of the teachers, learning and asking questions. Well, I'm sitting here in Judy's Ambassadors Explorers Sunday School classroom because she loved learning too. And I imagine that the same curiosity and love for learning that led Jesus to the temple at age 12 is what led Judy to explore museums in her free time as a little girl in Chicago. Curiosity is the greatest gift of learning, growth, faith, and indeed in our ability to hold on to hope, to not think that we have all the answers, but to rather ask the right questions. That's the key. To see as God sees is to keep our hearts and minds open as God does, to allow our vision to be refracted and refreshed by God and by others, again and again.
thou my vision, O Lord of my heart. Not be all else with me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought, by day or by night. Waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my soul shelter, and thou my high tower. Raise thou me heavenward, O power of my power. Riches I heed not, nor vain empty praise. Thou mine inheritance, now and always. Thou and thou only, first in my heart. High King of heaven, my treasure thou art. King of heaven, my victory won. May I reach heaven's joys, O bright heaven's sun. Heart of mine own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all.
You have heard various memories from friends and family about Judy's life. And now I invite you to continue to listen to her story. For in and through her life, we see beautiful glimpses of God as Judy lived faithfully, lifting her eyes to the mountains, relying on the strength of God, as the psalmist writes, and tuning in to the voice of wisdom and raising that wisdom in her own voice at various crossroads throughout her life, teaching others, as we read in Proverbs. Listen in her story for the prophetic voice of Micah, in and through the posture of humility in Judy's life, and in her urging of justice for others. And like we read in Joshua, see how Judy moved through her life with faith, not fear, letting God lead her in whatever direction came next. Find the times when Judy poured her life into her church, her faith and her faith community, as the Apostle Paul writes, for how a life rooted in prayer, gratitude, and faith creates the kind of foundation that we need to withstand both our successes and our failures. And more than anything, imagine the spirit of that independent 12-year-old Jesus sitting in the temple with teachers, asking questions, being curious, learning, and doing some teaching himself. For while Judy truly loved and worshiped the God of all creation, she also very much followed the leading and example of Jesus, who was always and forever curious about life, curious about people, curious about the world, and curious about God. And the unfurling of that curiosity created pathways of love. Pathways of love that remained long after Jesus left this earth, and pathways that Judy walked on in her lifetime, and that you and I still walk on today. Judy's pathway began on June 16th, 1930 in Chicago, and it wasn't exactly a smooth road at first. She grew up doing well in school, excelling in her favorite subject, English, and enjoying extracurriculars like theater and field hockey, and spending her free time walking to nearby museums to explore the latest exhibit. It's no wonder she later volunteered so many years at the Denver Museum for Nature and Science. But even with those happy memories, Judy's childhood and early years were not easy. Her mother, Bernice, died of an illness when Judy was 4 years old. And while the impact of that loss is impossible to measure, she was fortunate that there were people in her life to care for her. The family maid, Miss Sharshall, who really helped raise Judy, especially during those ages of 4 to 9. Her father, Donald, who was a teacher, a professor in the field of engineering, he always had some interesting experiment going on in the basement, including working on some of the earliest technologies around cassette tapes. He always had his 8mm camera out filming the family. And then there was her stepmother, Christine, who married her father when Judy was 9 years old. Christine was a positive, supportive figure in Judy's life. In fact, Judy later moved Christine out to Colorado so she would be closer to her, so that she could help care for her in her later years. She also had her older brother, Donald Jr., who she loved and looked up to. He served in World War II, and tragically, he died shortly before the end of the war on Good Friday of 1945 at the age of 20. In later years, Judy's daughter Donna said her mom started to talk more with her about these tragic losses she experienced at such a young age 4 and age 15. And she no doubt was forever processing those griefs. But Judy did not let grief or loss define her, not as a child or as a youth, and not as an adult either. Judy always kept herself involved in life and moving forward on those pathways of love. Education was literally in Judy's DNA, as was an innate love of learning and curiosity about life. So it's no surprise that she graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in education. No small feat for a woman in the late 1940s, early 1950s. Her first adventure in life then was to move away from Chicago as she headed to Tacoma, Washington for her first teaching job. She taught 4th and 5th grade and loved it. She loved the students, their questions, and eager spirits. One of her favorite stories to teach was The Elephant's Child by Rudyard Kipling, part of the Just So story series. This is not surprising because that particular story is about the advantages of being curious and inquisitive and learning and going to see things for yourself, even when others around you prefer that you not do so or think that you're silly. Judy also met her husband, Sam, in Tacoma. He was in the Army and he was stationed there, and they were married in 1956. They moved to Denver when Sam got a job with Honeywell, and it was here that they started their family. Judy was a stay-at-home mom for their 3 children, Marilyn, Donna, and Ken. The marriage was happy at first, and the kids remember fun camping trips as a family. Smaller weekend camping trips quite frequently, and then Judy's father and stepmother would drive out from Chicago in their large station wagon, and they'd all go hiking and camping together sometimes, all around Colorado and other national parks too. Donna remembers this one camping spot in Devil's Head that was their favorite because it had this huge, steep, sloping rock near it. And the kids, about ages 5, 7, and 9 to 10-ish at the time, could scoot up the rock backwards on their behinds to get to the top and then crawl around and slide down and have fun. And Donna said she remembers her mom always standing at the bottom, seemingly so afraid and worried about the kids, not wanting them to fall or hurt themselves. Donna said it's kind of a symbolic story for her because it made it seem like her mom was a fearful person, someone who was naturally afraid a lot. But the truth is, the older Donna got and the more she learned of her mom's adventures and travels later in life, she discovered her mother was actually quite brave and far less delicate or fragile than she once thought. These were all happy memories of the family together. But as time went on, Sam went in a different direction, the couple grew apart, and they went their separate ways, and they were divorced. It was as amicable as a divorce can be. The only argument was over custody of the children, which is understandable as they both loved their children dearly. Both Sam and Judy made sure the kids knew that the divorce was not their fault and that they loved them very much. After the divorce, Judy returned to work, at first substitute teaching for a couple of years, but then she needed something more consistent, and she worked at Swedish Hospital in medical records for 6 years before moving to Martin Marietta, now Lockheed Martin, to work as a clerk specialist until she retired. Even as she was a working mom, Judy was very involved in her children's lives. She never missed a single performance or recital or activity or anything for the kids. If she could be there, she was there. Truly, being present was one of the greatest gifts Judy gave to all of us, but especially to her children. She was the Campfire Girls leader for both Marilyn and Donna, which meant a lot to them and also to their friends who loved coming to Mrs. Drury's basement for fun activities. Ken remembers taking a fencing class with his mom at the YMCA when he was around 13. This was her idea. Now, she was not terribly coordinated, but it was a memorable experience for him nonetheless. Ken also remembers his mom always making sure that he was home by curfew, which was 9 or 10 o'clock at night, depending on his age. And the whole neighborhood knew when it was time for him to come home. He'd be out playing with friends and he'd hear that sound, "Ken!" and he would respond, "Coming!" That was their nightly ritual. Donna remembers that as they grew up in the 60s as kids, everything was about space, right? And so their mom would buy them space foods, just like the astronauts, that beloved orange powdered drink Tang, which they did not like, and space food sticks, which was a candy treat that they liked quite a lot. She'd hide the space food sticks, but the kids would find them and eat them and then put the wrapper back, hoping that they would trick her into thinking that they hadn't eaten them. She also bought Shasta Cola, but never the normal flavors like cream soda and chocolate. Another favorite memory was making oatmeal aggression cookies. Instead of using a mixer, Judy taught her kids that you just buy all the ingredients and you put them in a big bowl and you mix everything together with your hands. And all that mixing and the kneading of the dough, well, that helped get your aggression out. Hence the name, oatmeal aggression cookies. Marilyn remembers going to the parade of homes with her mom. They loved to look at old houses together, and this is something that extended into adulthood. They'd go looking at houses with unique architectural details in Boulder and Greeley with relatives. But for as much as Judy loved her children, and she was also working hard to provide for them, she also had a life outside of her kids. She got involved with Parents Without Partners, and dated several men, one fairly seriously. But at such outings, she learned disco dancing, and she loved that one of the guys she dated was into motorcycles. Her spirit of adventure was always there, I suppose, even if more veiled at times than others. As the kids grew up and became adults and started their own families and careers, Judy continued to be a constant support in their lives. She was present with them when they needed her. And while she was not a terribly affectionate mother, having not been raised that way herself, she showed her love through her presence. Ken said he could talk to his mom about anything, faith, politics, current events. He didn't necessarily go to his mom for advice per se, but they could just talk without needing to have an agenda, and he really valued that. In fact, he learned in later years that when she would call and say, "I need my light bulb changed," or "my fridge is acting up," he learned that what his mom was really saying to him was that she wanted to talk. He was happy to be that conversation partner. Donna remembers one key moment in her life as a mother with young children. She had a 6-year-old and 3 children under age 2. And this was a new reality for her as she was fostering and adopting and really struggling to juggle it all. And she called her mom one day. Donna was in her 40s, Judy in her 70s, and said, "Mom, I can't do this." And without skipping a beat, her mom said, "I'll drive there and I can be there in 3 days." And she did, and she stayed over a week. Judy was there when she could be. But, being far apart from Donna and Marilyn's families was difficult because that meant she lived far from many of her grandchildren. But she loved it when they did visit. Even when she got a bit upset when the particular way she had things in her house got slightly messed up. Judy definitely had a certain way that things needed to be. It was just who she was. She liked her files and her books in the way that she had them, and her furniture and pretty much anything else in her home. It was her system, and please don't mess with it. Thank you very much. Now, Ken understood his mom's particularities as a matter of respect, right? She had a deep respect for things, objects, just as she did people. You treat every object with respect, just as you treat every person with respect. In my mind, I can literally visualize and hear Judy saying something very similar to this in her mild-mannered but firm and matter-of-fact soft voice with the slight raise of her eyebrows. I mean, Judy could communicate so much with her sparkling eyes and her expressive brow. Now, though she didn't get to see them as often as she wished, Judy loved to write letters to her grandchildren and always made sure to send a card on their birthdays. She treasured the visits she had with them, loved to bake together in the kitchen. She loved hearing about their adventures. She loved spending time with them at the holidays. And whenever she could be at a concert or an event, especially for Ken's girls because they lived close, she was, of course, there. Even as she was present for her family, Judy was very present for herself, too. She didn't just wait around for life to happen to her. She went out and discovered life for herself and the world around her. Judy kept her body active through camping and water aerobics and spending time outdoors, and she kept her mind active through book groups and movie clubs and volunteering at the museum. And she kept both her mind and her body active through her travel adventures. She was truly a lifelong learner and explorer. For a woman who had literally never been anywhere other than Chicago, Illinois, Tacoma, Washington, and Denver, Colorado, she certainly started off her travels with a bang, an alphabetical bang at that, beginning with the letter A. Her first travel venture was to Australia, the second was to Alaska, and then to Antarctica. Judy would count every penny, and she monitored her spending so that she could save and go on these travel adventures. She'd go with groups, different programs, and she didn't really know anyone when she went, but when she came back, she always had friends. One of her favorite things to do when she traveled was to take pictures of the wildlife because she loved animals. In fact, Donna said she would buy plastic placemats with pictures of animals on them because that was way cheaper than buying professional photos or paintings. And then she'd frame these placemats and put them on her wall at home. Judy ended up traveling all over the world and had a story or two or three and a tale about an adventurous activity for every place she went. Seeing a solar eclipse, riding the Orient Express, cruising the Amazon, doing an archaeological dig for woolly mammoths, sleeping in a yurt, trying to parasail. She went to 5 continents before she ever went to Europe. And after visiting places like Mongolia and Siberia, it's no wonder that by the time she got to London and Salzburg, she wasn't that impressed with them. Donna told me that one of her mom's favorite book series was the Mrs. Paulifax series, which is about a woman in her mid-60s who had raised her kids and was now on her own. She was a very mild-mannered, well-mannered woman, an upstanding citizen, a volunteer, but she had a secret life as a CIA agent. Her kids always thought that she was traveling the world, but really she was a spy. Well, we don't exactly think that Judy was a spy, but there is certainly a lot about Mrs. Paulifax's life that resembled Judy's. No wonder she loved that series. She truly was not afraid to try anything new, and she loved adventure. In fact, it seems that when the kids were little, they thought that their mom always needed to be protected. Protected from harm, protected from disappointments, protected from feelings, from whatever. But as they grew older, they realized just how truly brave and resilient and independent she was. Ken remembers his mom, when she fell back in November, saying that he needed to cancel all the appointments on her calendar. And Ken knows her schedule really, really well, but even he said he had no idea how many activities that she was involved with, how full her social life was. Truly, Judy was her own person through and through, who lived life as she wanted to live it, while still being present for her family and present for her friends and church community. Her bravery and courage came in large part, I believe, because of her strong faith. Her older brother had a spirited, passionate faith. He had written in and marked up books by the evangelist D.L. Moody. Judy herself was baptized at age 9 at the Lorimer Baptist Church in Chicago. She was active in church when she lived in Tacoma. In fact, her husband Sam would always say that he gave Judy credit for getting him to church and helping instill faith in him. And then she and Sam joined Calvary when they moved to Denver, and the kids were raised here. Faith is something that has always been important to Judy. And she was not only active in church in terms of never missing a Sunday worship service and always being involved in women's circles, mission circles, Bible studies, Sunday school, and often holding the positions of secretary and treasurer in these organizations. She was also active in church in terms of caring about all of us, asking how we were, asking who was on the prayer list and who needed support that week. She prayed for people, and she reached out to all of us in a very personal way. Whenever I'd go visit Judy in the hospital following one of her many joint replacement surgeries, she'd always first ask me how I was doing before I could even get a word out to ask her how she was doing. And one of the qualities that I admired most about Judy, beyond her insatiable curiosity and love of learning and her desire to truly think critically and make her faith her own, was her engagement with culture, evidenced by her participation in book groups and film groups and volunteering at the museum and all her travels, but also in her engagement with issues of race and justice. In recent years, as our church developed a partnership with New Hope Baptist in Denver, an African-American congregation, Judy came to all of those conversations and potlucks and events and talkbacks after plays, all the things where we were talking about race and issues about justice. She was there. She was truly engaged and cared. And I found out through talking with her kids that she had kind of been that way her whole life. Marilyn remembers that when she was in 4th grade or so, Calvary had an exchange with a black church in the area. And Judy made sure that her kids were a part of that. And some of the other families really didn't necessarily participate, but her family was going to be there. Marilyn remembers being the only white face in a room full of black children, how impactful that experience was for her. To realize what it feels like to not be a part of the majority. Donna remembers that when she called her mom after an experience of racial discrimination she had trying to enroll her daughter, who was a child of color, into an extracurricular program, that her mother comforted her and just said, keep trying, keep enrolling her in whatever activity she could. Don't give up. Ken also named key characteristics of his mother, being that she was tolerant and patient and interested in faith and politics, conversations about theology and ethics, and I certainly echo that sentiment. Judy was so open-minded, so curious. If I could clone her curiosity and that openness to listen and learn, and if I could bottle that up, I would, and then I'd hand it out on the street corners for free to everyone who passed by. Our world needs the kind of learned and open mind that Judy espoused, a mind that was firm in her own convictions and faith, but not so firm that she couldn't learn or be persuaded of new thoughts or different ways of thinking about things. Her face lit up when she'd have one of those aha moments, and her spirit would light up when she was laughing and connecting with others. Judy's spiritual life was also connected to nature. One of her favorite things about camping, Marilyn told me, was that her mom would say, "Get me to the place of not hearing the noise." She liked the solitude and quiet. And I love the way Ken described his mom, which I think is how many of us experienced her, in that she didn't make a big splash, right, or an immediate impact on people. Her presence was subtle but consistent. Her impact on you was gradual, but oh so lasting. Judy was indeed a bright light in our world, but hers was a gradual glow. She never blinded us with her presence. She was that glow that was strong and there like a lighthouse, right? Always present and steady, but not forceful. The world is not the same without her in it, but it shouldn't be, because God creates each of us uniquely, and we each have a unique impact on the world. This is why losing one we love is so very, very hard. The deeper we love, the deeper we grieve what we have lost. The good news is that as difficult as it is, death cannot sever our connection to those we have lost. The soul is eternal and can never be extinguished. But not only the soul survives the grave. The lessons that our loved ones taught us, their goodness, their deeds, their humor, their love, their wisdom, these things remain with us always. When something in your life sparks a memory for you about Judy, in that moment, you'll think of her. And you'll remember that she has woven a permanent thread of love through your lives, through your hearts, that can never be removed. And thanks be to God for that. You know that story of Jesus in the temple at age 12? It's the only story we have of Jesus' childhood after his dedication when he was really little. So it tells us a lot about him, while also leaving quite a bit up in the air. So much of his childhood and early adulthood is a mystery to us. And it is true, isn't it, that we never really know the fullness of another person's life. There is always some element of mystery, which we also honor on this day. Only God knows the fullness of Judy's life, heart, spirit, and soul. But thanks to the way that she lived, Judy definitely didn't keep us in the dark about who she was. She was a bright spirit, a bright light in our world and in our lives. May her story inspire you to live more deeply into your own story, your own unique calling, to use your own particular voice in the world. The world needs you to be the fullest expression of you that you can be. I'm not sure that Judy ever really fully understood just what an amazing woman she was. But I don't know that any of us can see that in ourselves, by ourselves fully, right? We need others around us to help us see that and name that. So may we go into the world and do both of these things. May we shine our spirits and gifts brightly into the world as Judy did, and may we also be the ones who help shine the light on others and for others. For whether we are in this life or have already gone on to the next, we are all in this together, even when we're apart. Amen. Let us pray. Ever-creating and everlasting God, we who are gathered virtually today, all of us have different stories and varied journeys. But we are here before you today, O God, as ones who remember and celebrate the life of your beloved daughter, Judy. Even though Judy's family and friends have felt deeply over the past 6 months her absence, and will continue to grieve her loss in their lives, we are so grateful for her presence with you now, O God. for this season of life eternal when she rests fully in your embrace and welcome, and in your peace that passes our understanding. We are grateful that Judy is with you and is finally and forever healthy and whole in body, mind, and spirit. Lord, the hearts of those of us who are Judy's closest family and friends are full of so many memories, moments of joy and warmth and love that live on in the stories that we tell and in the ways that we live our lives. Each of these memories and all of these moments are such gifts, O God. Thank you for them. Thank you for the gifts of family and faith, the gifts of hard work and humor, the gifts of connection, generosity, kindness, resilience, the gift of lifelong learning, adventuring, exploring, thinking and growing, the gifts of endurance and perseverance. Thank you, O God, for the gifts of love and sacrifice, memory and hope. And thank you for the gift of life itself, and for how you shepherd us through the many seasons in our lives in ways beyond what we could ask or imagine. With your tender mercy, Lord, comfort those who mourn. May your peace be with each person who was touched by Judy's life through her guidance or wisdom, her provision, her laughter, her particularities and eccentricities, her insights and strength, through her care and love. Guide Marilyn, Donna, and Ken and their families through this season of grief and transition, as one they love is no longer with them in the way that she has been for so many years. And we pray that you would guide all of us, O God. Reinvigorate our hearts with a deep commitment to faith and family and joy. Continue to mold our hearts and minds, souls and bodies to be vessels of service, to generously pour forth the love and light that has been given to us through you, and especially through our experience of it in Judy's life. We voice this prayer to the one who welcomes us each fully as we are, the one who is patient and kind with us, the one who never stops working on our behalf, the one who teaches us the most important things in life, the one who has known suffering and brokenness and darkness and even death, but who has not been overcome by them. The one who lives and reigns with you, the everlasting and eternal God, Jesus Christ, who taught us the prayer we say together now, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Christ be near at either hand, Christ behind me, before me stand. Christ with me where'er I go, Christ around, above, below. Christ being my heart and mind, Christ within my soul enshrined, Christ control my wayward heart, Christ abide and ne'er depart. Christ my life and only way, Christ my lantern night and day, Christ be my unchanging friend, guide and shepherd,
like to make a gift in honor of Judy's life, you may do so by going to calvarydenver.org/give, choose Memorial Gift, and type in Judy Drury Memorial Fund. You may also text Open to All to 77977, and you'll be directed to our Give page. And of course, you may mail a check to the church here at Calvary, 6500 East Girard Avenue, Denver, Colorado, 80224. And know that as the pandemic passes and we're all able to gather and be in the building again, you are always welcome to come into this space, Calvary's Foot of the Cross courtyard, for a quiet moment of reflection, to say a word of goodbye to Judy or to one of the many countless saints who rest here. Now, as you go forward with your day, after this time of honoring Judy's life and walk into the rest of your life, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. Amen.